Welcome to Sinister Heroes. I'm your host, Danny Iniquitous. Thank you for tuning in. If you're new to the channel, this is a channel about Dungeons and Dragons. We try and take a darker tone with everything we do here. So if you like edgier kind of content, definitely hit that like and subscribe button. Check us out on Patreon and check out our good friends Dice Legion. And make sure to use the promo code Sinister for any of your purchases. It helps you out and you can use that code repeatedly. Without further ado, let's jump into this week's video. We're going to talk about multiclassing. Multiclassing, it's not something I do often. I say this all the time. I am significantly more of a role player than I am of a min-maxer, and multiclassing tends to be something that is predominantly done in the min-maxing world. A lot of people tend to do it. A lot of people have great builds and have a lot of fun doing it. I'm going to discuss my point of view on it and what kind of things I think you really should look into when discussing or even coming up with the idea to multiclass. So that way at least you're better prepared for some of the things you might be facing when you do so. From a role-playing standpoint, I really don't multiclass unless the story really kind of gives me an opportunity to, and I kind of let the story happen. In a situation where maybe you encounter a deity and they leave an object or they give you an opportunity to join into their service, then yeah, that's a great reason to take a level dip into Warlock and match that Warlock level to whatever patron that might be. It's a great way to grab a hook into the story. If you don't have your character tied deeply to the story already, that's a great way to make the story more impactful and to make you really a part of this growing world or whatever campaign you happen to be in. I say this because if you just take the multiclassing just as an opportunity to grow your character and min-max, it's a different component altogether. A lot of the times when you start games at a higher level, even just like a level 4 or something like that, a lot of the times a min-maxer would have their character laid out because you kind of really have to know what you're doing specifically almost by a level-to-level basis to maximize what you're going to do. So you would have already had your reasoning and your understanding for your abilities and why you wanted them, but maybe your character didn't. And that's one of my main issues with multiclassing, because I want my character to grow throughout the story, whatever that story might be. Taking the opportunity to dive into whatever the DM's offering is a great way to really immerse yourself in the world. And I find once you do that, then the campaign isn't just a game you're playing. It's something you look forward to. It's something you're excited about. It's something you want to see your character evolve and help change for whatever benefit or whatever reasoning you have for joining the party in the first place. A couple of things to note when you're considering multiclassing. First and foremost, you have to know both those subclasses and class abilities really, really well. They should be classes you're very familiar with and whose abilities you understand and can read like the back of your hand. It's crucial because not knowing these things really, really well is going to cause you a lot of time spent just rereading it and kind of breaking immersion just to make sure you do things right or double checking some of the things that you're doing. I know whenever I do something and then the DM has to look at it, there's always that doubt in my mind of like, oh, did I get it wrong? Am I able to do this? And I don't like that feeling, and I feel like that kind of breaks the moment for me. So you do really need to know exactly what your classes do, exactly what level they can do certain things, and what your subclasses do. And when they're two different classes, it becomes a little bit more difficult. Depending on what level you are at, it's dynamically different. If you take 5 levels and 5 levels in something, that's 2 very different classes with abilities that you really need to justify how to use, when you can use them. There are a couple of misconceptions about multiclassing, and some of those are a lot of the time because DMs just kind of waive those rules or don't really follow them to the T. One of the best examples of that is if you're a class that doesn't have heavy armor proficiency, and you multi-class into a class that does, like a fighter or a paladin, you don't gain heavy armor proficiency. That is negated. You can go as far up as medium armor. That's part of the rules. If you're doing classes that have spells, say you're 2 different spellcasters and you're taking a level dip into another caster so you can pick up some spells, when you do that, you don't gain free reign of their spell list. You just don't. I'm sorry. You gain at first level the opportunity to learn whatever spells they can at first level from spell slot level 1. As you level up in that class, you then can replace a spell for a spell that you have a spell slot available to cast from. So if you took a 1 level dip into warlock and say you had 7 like 4th level, 5th level spell slots in something else, you don't just get to pick 4th and 5th level spells that you can choose from the warlock. You can't. That's not how the rules work. As you level up in that class, you can pick spells for an appropriate spell slot that you can cast from, but it doesn't give you free reign. That's another thing that people tend to get very, very confused. They take 1 level dip and they just constantly pick out spells from that other spell list. Really doesn't work that way by the rules. A lot of the times DMs just kind of let it go, but those are some of the things that if you're playing with a hardline DM or someone that plays the rules pretty straight and pretty hard, those are things you do have to advance and change your mind about, because it definitely impacts what you're doing. A lot of the times going in between spellcasters is really dependent on what exactly you're trying to do. If you're going to go into Warlock, that's a whole different thing altogether because of the way pack magic works. And if you're going to go into Sorcerer, or you're going to go away from Sorcerer into something else, you're losing a sorcery point, which is a very important resource to a sorcerer. So you got to juggle a lot of plates when you're dealing with spellcasters and multi-classing. So it becomes very difficult to tangibly have a good grasp on that. So definitely read up on it and take your time to understand how the spell system works, how multiple levels and spellcasters work, and what happens when you mix in Gish classes or half-casters or like artificers, paladins, and rangers, and how that changes the whole dynamic of what you're doing. It's complicated. It is not easy. A lot of people get the rules wrong. Definitely talk to your DM to kind of square all that stuff away. One of the things that I find challenging is in games where multiple people are multi-classing. It kind of covers a very wide area of abilities and class roles. So it makes it very, very interesting to kind of figure out how your character fits in, or how everyone's character gets in. Some characters get to be the kind of do everything kind of person, but those are kind of specifically designed for bards and rogues because they're gifted with adventuring things, expertise, and things like that. The more you broaden your character, the less easy it is to fit into a role. And every character has a place and a role within a party. Some people share that responsibility. When you have 2 faces, it works. When you have two big beefy tanks that kind of fit a specific stereotype, it works. You know, you can do things like that. But if you're looking for a more focused character, really like laser pointed on what your abilities are and things you do, yeah, min-maxing and multi-classing can give you that. But you do have to weigh the weight of out of combat and in combat. A lot of multi-classing comes into play for the purpose of in combat. And don't get me wrong, nobody wants to be weak. If you're making a character, no matter how crazy it is, it still has to tangibly function in the world. So you really have to do things that mandate your abilities to succeed. And that's fine. But you do also have to succeed in out of combat. And this is where I tend to have a bigger difficulty multi-classing because I follow the story. I always encourage myself to stick to the story and to the ideas and to really, really play into my character. One of the things I do before every session is I go through all my traits, my personality traits, and whatever notes I have about how my character is and about how my character interacts with other party members, who are their friends and why they're their friends and what kind of bonds I'm making. It's a little OCD, but I like to put my best effort in. I like to go as hard as I can with the role playing because that's my favorite aspect of it. I like to put myself on a shelf and like let my character come to the forefront and just release all the excitement and joy I find in losing myself in the character. Definitely definitely know your stuff when it comes to multiclassing. Read the rules, read them backwards and forwards until you get that down packed. Definitely go over it with your DM, because you don't want to find yourself in a scenario where you're arguing rules and abilities and stating how things work, because it becomes problematic. It becomes a big time waster, and no one else is really enjoying that moment. It's kind of just something that they're just waiting to pass so they can continue going forward. It also is important to really know the classes that you're going to be playing and how they work together and how each of their abilities work. It can be complicated. It can be very confusing. It's going to take you a long time to get it down, so don't expect it to happen like right away game one. Take your time, pull it together, and just relax. You'll learn how to do it. It'll work out after a couple of sessions. One thing I do want to say about min-maxing in as its whole dynamic, it's great when that's something that's really, really important to you. When that's your joy, that's what you do this for. That's you love that strategy. You love to watch that grid view come up and that battle map come out. That's fine. That's awesome. But I encourage you to don't negate the role playing and always put that as a big factor into making your character, because it's great to play a tactical sequence and figure out cool things to do and drag your enemy around and really change the battle map and try and do cool things. But it's better when those pieces mean something to you. Like, everyone loves to play chess. Everyone knows how important the bishop and the rooks are. But when they matter, when you love those, now it's a different kind of sequence. Now the game has changed. Now offense is more risky because you have more to lose. And when you start having that role-playing kind of connection with the other characters and with the story, it's going to really break open the game for you and really pull you into a newer experience, which is awesome. That being said, we're going to bring this video to a close. If you've made it all the way this far, I am sorry if I got you mad. But thank you so much. We want to thank our friends who support us on Patreon. We want to thank our dear friends at Dice Legion. Again, that promo code is Sinister. And thank you so much for giving a spooky kid a chance.